Hello, and welcome to Very Kimberly, the healed side of codependency. By the time I was in 6th grade, my self-esteem had plummeted to the point where I would openly hurl insults towards and about myself. If another kid tried to insult me, I insulted myself worse, as if it was a competition. I always won those competitions, leaving the other child utterly confused, yet silent. None of my peers at that time dared say anything negative about me, because they all knew I would say something even more negative about myself. So, what was the point? In other words, my beratement towards myself shut them up. And on some level, it made me feel emotionally safe from the negative opinions of others. Beating myself up this way, either verbally or internally, would become an emotional survival strategy that I would use throughout my life, well into adulthood. But in 6th grade, I had a teacher, Ms. Elder, who was the very first person that ever really saw my real potential. At the beginning of this school year, however, I thought that she just hated me the way that Mr. Casper did. She opened my desk, dumped the sloppy mess onto the floor, and told me to put it back neatly. She declared that she wasn't afraid to fail me if I did not deserve to pass. One day, however, Ms. Elder kept me in the classroom to finish work while the other kids went to music or art class or something like that. After a few more times of keeping me behind to finish work, she commented how good my work and grades were when the other kids weren't around. Ms. Elder was the very first person other than my parents who told me that I was smart. But she also taught me that just being smart meant nothing if it wasn't applied. And because she believed in my intelligence, I began to believe in it myself. Unfortunately, her believing in my intelligence didn't help me believe in myself as a person, nor did it give me the identity I so desperately craved as a young 12-year-old girl. It was around this time that my school was recruiting students to play instruments in the band. They had started recruiting the year before, but when I had tried out for the flute, I didn't make the cut. All of my friends were trying out for instruments, and one of them talked me into trying out for clarinet instead. This one I aced, and the next thing I knew, my parents were renting a clarinet and I was getting out of class, much to my delight, to practice. My family was supportive of this new musical activity until we learned that in 7th grade I would have to make a choice between being in the band and my friends and being in chorus, which is something I always wanted to do. See, my entire childhood up to this point had been all about singing. I sang in every single church Christmas pageant, even singing in trios or solos, just like Grandpap Clyde. And I was always told to sing at family gatherings with Grandpap Clyde as well. Singing was my escape from all the drama and conflict and fighting at home. Singing was the only thing in my childhood that made me feel fulfilled. And even though singing was something I thoroughly just enjoyed doing, there was another hidden reason why I think that I loved it so much. It was the only time that I felt approval. I felt seen and heard. Performance became a way to feel loved and accepted, because any other time I did not feel that way with my family, or anyone else for that matter. When Grandpap Clyde heard about this decision between the band and chorus, he was deeply upset. I remember him just going on and on about him wanting to pay for voice lessons and that my voice needed to be quote unquote trained. This was the first time Grandpap Clyde had ever critiqued my singing. It was also the first time in my 12 years of life that he had ever brought up paying for singing lessons. And I was very deeply offended and hurt by that, because in my young mind, it meant that I wasn't enough. The one thing that I felt my family attributed to my worth and value wasn't enough. Looking back, I don't believe Grandpap Clyde meant it that way, but that is how I felt back then. I was also on the brink of becoming a teenager. And this meant that fitting in with peers was seen as a way to belong and a way to perform my way into acceptance. So I chose being in the band with my friends over chorus. And Grandpap Clyde never mentioned singing lessons again because of that choice. But he did show up to almost every band concert every single year, despite his disappointment. I often wonder if my life would have been different if I had chosen differently. It was the first decision I ever made that was not based on my own interests and natural abilities, but based on trying to achieve that sense of acceptance from peers. It was my first attempt at earning my self-worth, but it never, ever filled that void. In the 7th grade, I started to bloom academically. Starting out in all below average classes, I progressed to average classes by 8th grade. And by the time I was in 11th grade, I had progressed to college prep English courses. 7th grade was also the time when my dad decided to change denominations and leave the church that I loved and where I felt loved. I hope that you'll join me next time, and until then, this is Very Kimberly encouraging you to keep striving to be on the healed side of codependency.